I wished for a real home, with a bed and hot chocolate and no more cold. That was the very first thing the 6-year-old girl said when she stood in front of the most powerful man in the city, a mafia boss everyone else avoided even looking at. That night, snow was falling heavily outside Chicago Airport. Inside, a thin little girl in a torn coat had just thrown a coin into the fountain and whispered her wish. But she didn't know. The man standing behind her wasn't just another traveler. He was Vincent Rossi, a name that could silence the entire underworld. A man who had destroyed countless lives with a single order, yet no one had ever looked into his eyes and said something so simple. I just want a real home. In that moment, the cold-blooded mafia boss froze, because only a few seconds later, he would discover a truth that almost stopped his heart. The little girl standing in front of him might be the daughter he had lost 6 years ago. But the question that would leave everyone wondering was, if a ruthless mafia boss discovers that a homeless child might be his own daughter, will he protect her? Or will his dangerous past destroy her life before he even has the chance? If this story touched your heart, take a moment to reflect on the quiet power of kindness, especially when no one else chooses to show it. Share your thoughts in the comments and tell us where you're watching from. Which city and country are you in, and what time is it there right now? It's always amazing to see how stories like this connect people from all over the world. If moments like this remind you of the beauty of humanity, please like the video and subscribe to our channel so you don't miss more powerful stories that celebrate compassion, courage, and the simple acts of kindness that can change a life. The wind howled through the cavernous halls of Chicago O'Hare International Airport like a warning nobody wanted to hear. It was late October of 2025, and the first real cold snap of the season had arrived early, carrying sleet that tapped relentlessly against the massive floor-to-ceiling windows. Inside Terminal 3, the holiday travel rush had not yet begun in earnest, but the place still thrummed with restless energy. Delayed flights, overpriced coffee carts, steaming in the chill families, dragging suitcases that looked heavier than their owners. Overhead lights buzzed, faintly casting long clinical shadows across the polished floors. In a quieter corner near Gate H, 12 away from the main flow of passengers, sat Vincent Rossi. He was a tall man, broad-shouldered beneath a charcoal overcoat of fine wool that cost more than most people in this terminal earned in several months. Fair-skinned with sharp features softened only slightly by the year's mid-40s. Now he looked every bit the successful businessman he presented to the world, owner of several construction firms and waste management companies, scattered across the Midwest, legitimate on paper, profitable in reality. But the truth ran deeper, darker through veins of power that few outside his circle ever glimpsed. Vincent's hands rested on his knees, fingers interlaced so tightly the knuckles stood white. In the inner pocket of his coat lay an old, scuffed baseball, the red stitching frayed in places, the signature of his father long faded, but still legible under careful light. He carried it everywhere, a silent anchor to a life that had slipped away decades ago. The leather felt warm against his chest, a small rebellion against the cold settling into his bones. He stared at the runway, lights blinking through the storm, each flash a reminder of motion he could not quite feel inside. Guilt gnawed at him tonight, sharper than usual. It always did when the weather turned bitter. The memories came unbidden, his father's quiet voice teaching him to throw curveballs in the empty lot behind their Southside row house, the way the old man had laughed when Vincent finally got one right. That laughter had vanished the day Vincent chose the wrong path, the day he traded family baseball games for late-night meetings in smoke-filled back rooms. Remorse sat heavy in his gut, a constant pressure like a fist clenched around his heart. He had built an empire to escape the poverty of his childhood, yet every dollar felt stained, every victory hollow. Tonight the wound felt raw, exposed. He wondered, not for the first time, if redemption was even possible for a man like him. Across the terminal, far from the relative calm of Vincent's corner, a small figure moved through the crowds with the careful steps of someone trying not to be noticed. Lily Harper was 6 years old, thin to the point of fragility, her dark curls matted from days without proper washing. Her coat, once bright blue, now faded and patched with duct tape, was several sizes too big, the sleeves rolled up so many times they bunched awkwardly at her elbows. Beneath it, she wore a threadbare sweater her mother had knit years ago, the yarn pilled and thin. Her sneakers had holes in the soles. She could feel the cold concrete seeping through with every step. Lily clutched a small, cracked plastic backpack to her chest. Inside were her few possessions: a half-eaten granola bar saved from yesterday, a crumpled drawing of a house with sunshine and flowers she had never lived in, and a single photograph of her mother smiling in better days. The backpack was all she had left after the shelter had turned them away again last night, overcrowded, they said. So they had walked mother and daughter through the wind until they reached the L station, then rode to the airport because it was warm and open 24 hours. Emily had promised they would find a way home, but home had become a word without meaning. Emily Harper stood a few paces behind her daughter, now leaning against a pillar as if it were the only thing keeping her upright. She was 28 but looked older, hollow cheeks, dark circles under her eyes that no amount of sleep could erase because sleep never came in full. Her hair, once the color of honey, hung limp and unwashed. She wore the same jeans and hoodie she had worn for weeks, the fabric stiff with grime. Her hands trembled slightly, not from cold alone, but from the bone-deep exhaustion of a woman who had fought every day just to keep her child fed and safe. Rent had eaten their last dollars months ago. Eviction notices had piled up. Food stamps ran out faster than they arrived. Nights were spent in church basements or on park benches when the shelters closed their doors. Emily's body ached constantly, malnutrition carving lines into her frame, sleep deprivation blurring her thoughts until the world tilted. She had brought Lily here tonight because the airport offered free heat, free bathrooms, and the faint hope that someone might notice them. But hope felt dangerous now. Every glance from a security guard made her flinch. Every announcement about delays tightened the knot in her stomach. She watched Lily wander a little farther, searching the faces of strangers for kindness that rarely came. Vincent noticed the child first. She stopped a respectful distance away, small hands twisting the straps of her backpack. Her eyes, large, dark, impossibly trusting, met his without fear. Most people avoided looking at him directly. Something in his posture, his stillness warned them off. But this little girl tilted her head, studying him the way one might study a wounded animal. "Mister," she said, her voice soft, almost swallowed by the terminal noise. "Are you okay? You look sad. And maybe hurt." Vincent blinked. The words landed like stones in still water, rippling through the armor he had worn for so long. He glanced down at himself, nothing visible, no blood, no outward sign, but the knife wound from 2 nights ago still throbbed beneath his shirt, a reminder of a rival crew's latest attempt to carve out territory. He had walked away from that alley confrontation with nothing more than stitches and silence, but the pain lingered. "I'm fine," he said automatically, his voice low controlled. But the lie tasted bitter. Lily took one small step closer. "My mama says when people sit all alone like that, they're usually lost inside. Are you lost inside?" The question struck deeper than any blade. Vincent felt something crack inside his chest, a fault line long buried. Guilt surged, hot and violent guilt for the lives he had ruined, for the family he had failed, for the child he had never had, because his world allowed no room for softness. Remorse twisted sugar mingling with a sudden, fierce protectiveness he did not understand. This tiny girl, so clearly suffering, stood before him offering concern instead of begging. It was absurd. It was unfair. It tore at him. Across the way, Emily noticed. Panic flashed across her face, raw, immediate. She pushed off the pillar legs unsteady and hurried toward them. "Lily," she called, voice thin with fear. "Come here, sweetheart." But Lily did not move. She kept her eyes on Vincent. "Mama's coming," she whispered as if reassuring him. "She helps people too." Emily reached them breathless, one hand reaching instinctively to pull Lily behind her. She looked up at Vincent, really looked, and something in her expression shifted from terror to wary confusion. He was clearly wealthy, the coat, the watch glinting at his cuff, the quiet authority in his posture. Yet he had not dismissed her daughter. He had not called security. "I'm sorry," Emily said, quickly, voice trembling but polite. "She doesn't mean to bother you." Vincent rose slowly. He towered over them both, yet he kept his movements gentle, deliberate. "She's no bother," he said. His gaze flicked to Emily's face, saw the hollows, the exhaustion, the quiet desperation, and felt another surge inside him. Not pity. Something fiercer. Responsibility. The urge to shield them from the cold, from the world that had already taken so much. He glanced toward the exit doors where 2 men in dark jackets lingered, 2 long eyes scanning the crowd. Rivals. Always watching. One of them met his stare, smirked, then turned away. The threat hung in the air, unspoken but real. Vincent looked back at Lily. She was shivering now, teeth chattering softly. Without thinking, he shrugged out of his overcoat, the wool still warm from his body, and draped it around her small shoulders. It swallowed her completely, the hem brushing the floor. "Keep it for now," he said quietly. "It's warmer than the wind out there." Emily stared stunned. Tears welled but did not fall. "We can't. You can," Vincent interrupted softer than he intended. "For her." Lily looked up at him, eyes wide with wonder. "Thank you, mister." Vincent felt the baseball shift in his pocket, felt the old signature press against his heart. For the first time in years, the guilt eased just a fraction. Not gone, never gone, but quieter. Outside, the sleet turned to snow. Inside, something fragile began. The airport terminal felt suddenly smaller, the air thicker, as if the storm outside had pressed its weight against the glass and seeped inside. Vincent Rossi stood motionless for a long heartbeat after draping his overcoat around the child. The wool, soft Italian cashmere lined with silk engulfed Lily completely, the collar rising past her ears like a protective hood. She looked impossibly small inside it, a sparrow wrapped in winter armor. Her fingers curled into the fabric, instinctively clutching it close, as though afraid someone would take it away again. Emily Harper remained frozen, a step behind her daughter, one hand still outstretched as if to pull Lily back, the other pressed flat against her own chest, as though to steady a heart that refused to beat normally. Her eyes red-rimmed, shadowed by weeks of sleepless nights, darted from Vincent's face to the coat, then back again. She swallowed once, twice. When she spoke, her voice came out thin and careful, the way people speak when they have learned that loudness invites trouble. "Thank you," she whispered. "But we can't keep this. It's too much." Vincent did not answer right away. He was watching Lily. The girl had not moved. She simply stood there, breathing in the warmth that still clung to the coat, her small shoulders rising and falling in tiny, grateful sighs. Something inside Vincent twisted, sharp, sudden, almost painful. It was not pity. Pity was cheap, a coin tossed into a cup. This was deeper, older recognition. He saw the hollows of her cheeks, the way her wrists looked too fragile to hold, even the weight of the backpack, the faint bluish tint under her fingernails from too many nights, spent gripping cold metal railings or cardboard signs. He knew that look. He had worn it himself once, decades ago, before power replaced hunger. The remorse that had been gnawing at him all evening flared brighter, hotter. How many children had his choices indirectly hurt? How many families had gone cold because territory lines shifted on his say-so? The guilt rose like bile. He wanted to look away, but he could not. Lily's eyes held him clear, unafraid, searching. She tilted her head again. "You're really tall," she said softly. "Like a tree. Trees don't get cold, right?" Vincent felt the corner of his mouth twitch, almost a smile, but it died before it formed. "Trees get cold too, sweetheart," he murmured. "They just don't show it." Emily flinched at the endearment. Her body tensed, ready to scoop Lily up and run. She took half a step forward, voice trembling but firmer now. "We should go. The security people, they don't like kids wandering." Vincent followed her gaze. Two uniformed officers stood near the information desk, glancing their way every few seconds. Not yet suspicious, but curious. In his world, curiosity from authority was never innocent. He lowered his voice. "Stay a minute." "Just a minute. She's warm now. Let her be warm." Emily hesitated. Pride warred with desperation across her face. Pride that had kept her saying no thank you to charity handouts for months. Desperation that had forced her to sleep on airport benches the night before last, because the last shelter had turned them away for arriving after curfew. She looked down at Lily, saw the way the child's eyelids drooped with sudden bone-deep exhaustion, and the fight drained out of her shoulders. "Okay," she breathed. "Just a minute." Vincent gestured toward a row of empty seats near the window, far enough from the main flow of traffic that the noise dulled to a murmur. Emily guided Lily there carefully, as though the child were made of glass. When Lily sat, the coat pooled around her like a blanket. She pulled her knees up, hugging them, and rested her cheek against the wool. A tiny, contented sound escaped her, barely audible, but it landed in Vincent's chest like a hammer. He remained standing, one hand in his pocket, fingers brushing the old baseball. The leather felt heavier tonight. Emily sat beside her daughter, keeping one arm around Lily's shoulders. She did not look at Vincent directly. Instead, she stared at the floor, at the scuff marks on her worn sneakers. "We didn't mean to bother anyone," she said quietly. "We just needed somewhere warm tonight." Vincent nodded once. He understood more than she could know. "You don't have to explain." Silence stretched between them, fragile, electric. Outside, the sleet had thickened into steady snow. Runway lights blurred behind white curtains. Inside, the terminal's fluorescent hum seemed distant. Then Lily lifted her head. "Mister," she said, voice small but clear, "why do you look so sad? Is it because you're alone?" The question sliced straight through him. Vincent felt his throat close. For a moment he could not speak. Memories flooded in, uninvited: his father's funeral on a rainy afternoon in 2005. The way the casket had looked too small for the man who had once carried him on his shoulders. The night he had walked away from his mother's apartment because staying meant dragging her into his world. The years since building walls of money and muscle and silence. Remorse roared inside him now, violent, consuming. He had told himself power would protect the people he loved. Instead, it had isolated him completely. Lily waited, patient in the way only children can be. Vincent exhaled slowly. "Yeah," he said at last. "Something like that." Emily's head snapped up. She studied him, really studied him for the first time. Saw the fine lines around his eyes, the tension in his jaw, the way his hands stayed steady, even though something inside him clearly was not. Confusion flickered across her face, followed by a spark of something softer: curiosity, maybe even the tiniest thread of trust. Before she could speak, movement caught Vincent's eye. Near the escalators, 3 men in dark parkas had stopped. They were not travelers. Their postures were too alert, their glances too deliberate. Vincent recognized the tallest one immediately, Marco Delgado, lieutenant for the North Side crew that had tried to knife him 2 nights earlier. Marco's eyes locked on Vincent, then slid to the woman and child beside him. A slow, ugly smile spread across his face. Vincent's pulse kicked hard. Not fear, never fear, but cold, focused rage. They had followed him here, watched him, and now they saw weakness. He stepped slightly in front of Emily and Lily, shielding them without making it obvious. "Stay seated," he said quietly. "Don't move." Emily felt the shift in him instantly. Her body went rigid. "What's wrong?" Vincent did not answer. He kept his eyes on Marco. The other 2 men fanned out casually, pretending interest in departure boards. Lily sensed the tension. She peeked around Vincent's leg. "Are those bad men?" she whispered. Vincent crouched slowly so he was eye level with her. "They're just people," he lied gently. "But sometimes people forget how to be kind. You stay right here with your mama." "Okay," Lily nodded, trusting him completely. Vincent rose again. He pulled his phone from his pocket, thumbed a quick message to one of his own men waiting in the short-term lot. Reinforcements. Discreet. Fast. Then he walked calm, unhurried toward the escalators. Marco met him halfway. The smile never left his face. "Nice coat you're missing, Vin. Looks like you're playing Santa tonight." Vincent stopped 3 feet away, voice low. "Walk away, Marco. This isn't the place." Marco glanced past him toward Emily and Lily. "Cute kid. She yours." Vincent felt something snap inside, sharp, primal. Not anger. Protectiveness. The kind he had not felt since he was a boy watching his father bleed out on a hospital gurney. "She's nobody's business but her own." Marco laughed softly. "Everything's somebody's business in this city." Vincent stepped closer. "Not tonight." For a long moment they stood there, 2 predators sizing each other up in the middle of a crowded terminal. Around them, passengers hurried past, oblivious. Then Marco's smile faded. He jerked his head toward his men. "We'll see you around, Vin." They turned and melted back into the crowd. Vincent waited until they disappeared before returning to the seats. His hands were steady, but inside the storm raged. Guilt clawed deeper. He had brought danger near them. Remorse burned how many innocents had paid for his choices. Emily was watching him when he reached them. Fear had returned to her eyes, but so had something else. Gratitude, confusion, a fragile beginning of trust. "You didn't have to do that," she said softly. Vincent looked down at Lily. The girl had fallen asleep against her mother's shoulder, small fist still clutching the collar of his coat. "I did," he answered. Emily's breath hitched. Tears shimmered but did not fall. Why, Vincent had no easy answer. Only the truth, raw and unpolished, because no child should ever have to ask why someone helped them. He sat on the arm of the seat opposite them, close enough to shield, far enough to respect boundaries. The 3 of them waited in silence, while snow piled against the windows. In that quiet, condensed stillness, Vincent felt the first real fracture in the walls he had built around his heart. It hurt. It hurt terribly. But it also felt like coming home. The snow had thickened outside the terminal windows into a relentless white curtain, turning the runways into ghostly outlines. Inside, the fluorescent lights buzzed on, indifferent to the growing chill that seeped through every crack and seam. Vincent Rossi remained on the arm of the seat, 1 foot planted firmly on the floor, as though bracing against an invisible tide. His overcoat still enveloped Lily like a cocoon. She had not let go of the collar since he draped it over her. Her breathing had slowed into the shallow rhythm of near sleep, but her small fingers stayed clenched in the wool, as if letting go might mean the warmth would vanish forever. Emily sat rigid beside her daughter, knees pressed together, hands folded so tightly in her lap that the knuckles showed bone-white against her chapped skin. She kept stealing glances at Vincent, quick darting looks filled with equal parts gratitude and terror. Every few seconds, her gaze flicked toward the escalators where the 3 men had disappeared, then back to the child, then to the man who had just placed himself between them and whatever danger had followed him here. She did not understand him. She did not trust him. Yet the coat around Lily smelled faintly of expensive cologne and clean wool, and the child had not shivered once since it settled on her shoulders. That single fact anchored Emily in place when every instinct screamed to run. Vincent felt the weight of her scrutiny like a physical pressure. He kept his own gaze on the terminal corridor, scanning faces' postures, the subtle tells of men who moved with purpose instead of haste. His phone vibrated once against his thigh, a single short buzz from his driver in the lot. Clear for now. Watching exits. He exhaled through his nose, slow and controlled. The rage still simmered beneath his skin, but he forced it down. Not here. Not with them watching. Lily stirred. Her eyes fluttered open, glassy with fatigue. She looked up at Vincent first, then at her mother. "Mama," she whispered, voice hoarse from cold and thirst, "can we find something to drink? My throat hurts." Emily's face crumpled for a fraction of a second before she smoothed it. "Soon, baby. We'll find something soon." But there was no soon. The last few dollars had gone to the bus fare that brought them here. The vending machines demanded exact change or plastic they did not possess. Emily's stomach twisted with fresh humiliation, sharp, familiar, humiliating in its predictability. She had once been a woman who planned grocery lists, who clipped coupons, who made sure Lily had milk every morning. Now she measured survival in hours without hunger pangs so severe they doubled her over. Vincent caught the flicker of pain across Emily's features. He rose without a word and walked to the nearest newsstand kiosk 20 feet away. He returned with a small bottle of water, still cold from the cooler, and a packet of apple slices sealed in plastic. He placed them gently in Emily's lap. Emily stared at the items as though they might disappear. Her hands hovered above them, trembling. "We can't." "You can," Vincent said quietly. For her, tears welled again faster this time. Emily blinked them back fiercely. She unscrewed the cap with shaking fingers and held the bottle to Lily's lips. The child drank in small, greedy sips, water dribbling down her chin. When she finished, she offered the bottle back to her mother with both hands polite, even in exhaustion. Emily took a single sip, barely enough to wet her lips, then set the bottle aside as though it belonged to someone else. She looked up at Vincent. Her voice, when it came, was barely above a whisper. "Why are you doing this?" Vincent met her eyes. The question hung between them like smoke. Inside him, the storm raged harder. Remorse clawed upward, vicious, unrelenting. He saw his own mother in Emily's hollow cheeks, saw the boy he had been in Lily's thin wrists. He had spent years telling himself the empire he built would one day make things right, that power would buy forgiveness. Instead, it had only deepened the wound. Now here was proof, living, breathing proof, that the world still broke people while he stood untouched in tailored wool and quiet wealth. "Because no one helped us once," he said at last. The words came out rougher than he intended. "And I swore I'd never let that happen to anyone else if I could stop it." Emily's breath caught. Something shifted in her expression, suspicion, cracking curiosity blooming beneath the fear. She did not speak again, but she did not pull Lily away either. Lily finished the apple slices, slowly savoring each one. When the packet was empty, she licked her fingers, then looked at Vincent with wide, solemn eyes. "Thank you. That was the best food I've had in a long time." Vincent felt his throat close. He nodded once, unable to trust his voice. A moment later, Lily slid off the seat, still wrapped in the enormous coat. She tugged at Vincent's sleeve. "Mister, can we look for the fountain? The one with the shiny pennies? Mama says if you throw one in and make a wish, sometimes it comes true." Emily tensed. Lily but Vincent was already standing. "There's one near the food court," he said. "Not far." Emily rose slowly, legs unsteady from too many nights without proper rest. She took Lily's hand. Vincent walked beside them, not too close, but close enough that his shadow fell protectively over the pair. They moved through the terminal like a fragile procession, the child leading the mother, guarding the man, shielding. Halfway down the concourse, Vincent's phone buzzed again, 2 short pulses this time. "Trouble." He glanced sideways. 2 different men now, same crew, different faces, lingered near a coffee stand, pretending to check departure screens. One of them lifted a phone to his ear, lips moving. Vincent's jaw tightened. He steered them toward a quieter side corridor lined with closed gates. This way. Shorter path. Emily followed without question, though her grip on Lily's hand grew tighter. At the end of the corridor, the fountain waited, a modest, circular basin, coins glinting green and copper beneath rippling water. Lily broke free and ran forward, coat flapping like wings. She stopped at the edge, peering in. Vincent and Emily caught up. He reached into his pocket, pulled out a single quarter, and handed it to Lily. She accepted it with both hands as though it were treasure. "Make a good wish," he said softly. Lily closed her eyes tight. Her lips moved without sound. Then she tossed the coin. It spun through the air, caught the light, and disappeared beneath the surface with a soft plink. She turned to Vincent, beaming. "I wished for a real home, with a bed and hot chocolate and no more cold." Vincent felt something inside him fracture, clean, painful, irreversible. The remorse surged so violently he almost staggered. He had homes, penthouse apartments, lakefront estates, but none of them had ever felt like home. Not since the row house with the cracked sidewalk and his father's laughter echoing off the walls. Emily watched her daughter, tears slipping silently down her cheeks. She wiped them away with the sleeve of her hoodie, but more followed. "Lily," she whispered, voice breaking, Don't wish too big, baby." But Lily only hugged her mother's legs. "It's okay, Mama." The mister helped. "Maybe wishes work better when someone helps." Vincent looked away, blinking hard. The conflict inside him roared guilt for the danger he had drawn near them. Fury at the men who hunted him, tenderness so fierce it felt like violence against his own hardened heart. He wanted to gather them both up and take them somewhere safe. He wanted to burn the city down for ever letting them suffer. He wanted to disappear so they would never know what kind of man had touched their lives. Before he could speak, footsteps echoed behind them, heavy, deliberate. Vincent turned. Marco Delgado stood at the mouth of the corridor, flanked by the same two men. No weapons visible. Not yet. But the threat hung thick in the air. Nice family outing. Vin, Marco called, voice mocking but low. Didn't know you had a soft spot for strays. Vincent stepped forward, placing himself fully between the group and the approaching men. Walk away, he said again. Calm. Deadly calm. Marco smiled wider. You know how this works. You show weakness, someone takes it. Vincent's voice dropped. Not tonight. Not them. For several long seconds, no one moved. Snow tapped against the glass overhead. Then Marco lifted his hands in mock surrender. Your call, but weakness has a price. They retreated slowly, deliberately. Vincent waited until their footsteps faded before turning back. Emily had pulled Lily against her chest, one hand covering the child's ears even though no shouts had been raised. Her face was ashen, eyes wide with renewed terror. You're in danger, she whispered. Because of us. Vincent shook his head. Because of me, not you. Emily's knees buckled slightly. She caught herself on the fountain edge. Dizziness washed over her black spots, dancing at the corners of her vision. She had not eaten properly in days. Fear burned the last of her strength. Vincent reached out instinctively, steadying her elbow. The touch was light, careful. Easy, he murmured. Breathe. Emily looked up at him through tears. Suspicion lingered, but beneath it burned something new, overwhelming, terrifying trust. This man, wealthy beyond imagining, powerful enough to command fear in other powerful men, had just placed himself as a wall between her child and harm. Again. She did not pull away. In the quiet that followed, Lily reached up and slipped her small hand into Vincent's larger one. He froze. Then slowly he closed his fingers around hers. The gesture was small. It was everything. Outside, the snow fell harder. Inside, a fragile bridge began to form, built of trust, terror, and the kind of love that arrives unannounced and refuses to leave. The corridor beyond the penny fountain grew quieter as they walked farther from the main terminal artery, the echoes of rolling suitcases and distant announcements fading into a soft, muffled hum. Snow continued to lash the windows in furious gusts, turning the glass into frosted mirrors that reflected their small procession back at them. A tall man in a dark suit jacket, now coatless, a frail woman clutching her daughter's hand, and the child herself still dwarfed by the oversized wool garment that trailed behind her like a royal train. Lily's steps were slower now, the brief surge of energy from the apple slices already ebbing. Every few paces she swayed slightly, leaning into Emily's leg for balance. Vincent kept his pace matched to theirs, one hand hovering near Lily's shoulder without quite touching. His phone had gone silent after the last message, but the quiet felt deceptive, like the calm before a street fight he had broken up too many times to count. He scanned every shadow, every doorway, every cluster of travelers. The weight of the baseball in his pocket pressed harder against his ribs, with each step a reminder of innocence he had long abandoned, now mocking him in the presence of real living vulnerability. They emerged into a small atrium area near the lower-level food court. Tables stood mostly empty at this hour. The scent of reheated pizza and stale coffee hung in the air. A handful of weary passengers hunched over trays, scrolling phones or staring blankly at nothing. Vincent guided them toward a corner booth partially shielded by a potted ficus and a pillar. Sit here, he said quietly. Rest a minute. Emily hesitated at the edge of the booth. Her legs trembled visibly now, malnutrition and exhaustion conspiring to steal what little strength remained. She helped Lily slide in first, then eased herself down beside her, keeping one arm around the child as though the booth itself might swallow them both. Lily immediately curled against her mother's side, eyes half closed, small hands still buried in the coat sleeves. Vincent remained standing back to the wall, eyes on the entrances. He pulled out his wallet, soft black leather, monogrammed discreetly, and extracted a $20 bill. He placed it on the table in front of Emily, without flourish. For whatever she wants, he said. Hot chocolate, soup, anything warm. Emily stared at the bill as though it were a live thing that might bite. Her fingers hovered, then withdrew. Tears brimmed again, spilling over before she could stop them. I can't take your money, she whispered. We don't beg. Vincent's voice stayed low, steady. It's not charity. It's for her. She's cold. She's hungry. Let me help. The words landed like stones in Emily's chest. She looked down at Lily, saw the way the child's ribs showed faintly beneath the thin sweater when she breathed, saw the faint tremor that had nothing to do with cold and everything to do with a body running on empty for too long. Humiliation burned through her, hot, suffocating. She had once fed her daughter fresh fruit every morning, read bedtime stories in a room with clean sheets. Now she measured survival in stolen moments of warmth and half-remembered meals. The unfairness of it all crashed over her again. One missed rent payment, one unexpected medical bill, one too many nights of wind cutting through thin blankets on park benches. It had stripped her bare layer by layer, until dignity felt like a luxury she could no longer afford. She reached for the bill with shaking fingers. "Thank you," she managed. The words tasted like ash. Vincent nodded once. He turned to walk toward the nearest counter, hot chocolate with extra marshmallows, chicken noodle soup, a grilled cheese sandwich cut into triangles the way children like when a new voice sliced through the quiet. "Don't do it, Soph. I mean Lily. Don't trust him." The words came sharp, urgent from a boy no older than 7 standing at the edge of the atrium. He was thin like Lily's skin, the warm brown of autumn leaves, wearing a hoodie, 2 sizes too big, and sneakers held together with duct tape. His dark eyes burned with suspicion as they locked on Vincent. He clutched a crumpled paper cup in one hand, the other balled into a fist at his side. Emily gasped. "Jamal, the boy." Jamal stepped forward, positioning himself between Vincent and the booth. "I saw you from the hallway. He's got that look, Miss Emily. The same look the guys on the block have when they want something. You told me never trust guys like that." Emily's face drained of color. She reached for Jamal, pulling him close with her free arm. "How did you find us?" "I followed you from the shelter last night," he said, voice trembling but defiant. "You said you were coming here." "I waited outside till the doors opened. I wasn't going to let you and Lily be alone." Vincent stood frozen. The boy's words struck deeper than any rival's taunt ever had. He saw himself reflected in those fierce, frightened eyes, the man who moved through the city like a shadow, feared more than loved. Remorse surged again, violent and unrelenting. He had spent years cultivating that fear to survive, to protect what little he had left. Now it stared back at him in the form of a child who had already learned too much about danger. Lily lifted her head. "Jamal, he's nice. He gave me his coat. And food. And he scared the bad men away." Jamal's jaw tightened. "That's how they get you. They act nice first. Then they own you." Emily looked between the 2 children, then up at Vincent. Confusion warred with fresh fear. "He's my daughter's best friend," she explained softly. "They've been in the same after-school program, before we lost the apartment. He's staying with us for now. His mom, she's not well." Vincent nodded slowly. He understood more than she said. Broken homes, absent parents, children raising each other in the cracks of a city that did not care. He had grown up in those same cracks. "I'm not here to hurt anyone," he said, quietly addressing Jamal directly. "I'm trying to keep them safe." Jamal snorted. "Safe. You're the reason those guys were following us. I saw them. They looked at you like you owe them blood." The accusation landed like a slap. Vincent felt the old guilt roar back, louder, fiercer. Every choice he had made since he was 16 had rippled outward, hurting people he never met. Now the consequences stood before him in flesh and bone, 2 children who should never have known fear like this, a mother who could barely stand. Before he could respond, movement flickered at the far end of the atrium. 2 men different from Marco's crew but wearing the same hard-eyed alertness entered from the escalator bank. They scanned the room, gazes lingering on Vincent. Vincent's body tensed. He stepped sideways, placing himself once more between the booth and the newcomers. "Stay here," he murmured to Emily. "All 3 of you." Jamal's eyes narrowed. See, trouble follows him. Vincent did not argue. He walked toward the men, calm, deliberate, every inch the man who commanded respect through presence alone. They met near a closed gate. One of them, a stocky figure with a scar across his left eyebrow, spoke first. "Boss wants a word, Rossi. Says you've been distracted lately." Vincent's voice stayed even. "Tell him I'm handling personal business." The scarred man smirked. "Personal business don't include playing daddy to strays. Makes you look weak." Vincent stepped closer. "You tell him whatever you want. But if anyone touches them, the conversation changes." The 2 men exchanged glances. Then they backed off, slowly, grudgingly, disappearing down a side corridor. Vincent returned to the booth. Emily's face was pale, eyes wide with horror. Jamal stood rigid, fists clenched. Lily had started to cry quiet, hiccuping sobs muffled against her mother's hoodie. Vincent crouched to their level. "They're gone," he said gently. "For now." Emily reached out hesitant, trembling, and touched his sleeve. "You don't have to do this," she whispered. "We're not worth the danger." Vincent looked at her, really looked. Saw the terror, the exhaustion, the fragile thread of trust still holding despite everything. Something inside him shattered completely. "You are," he said, voice rough with emotion he could no longer hide. "You both are. All 3 of you." Jamal stared at him, suspicion warring with the tiniest flicker of doubt. Lily reached out a small hand and placed it on Vincent's knee. "Don't be mad at Jamal," she whispered. "He's scared too." Vincent covered her hand with his own large, scarred, gentle. I know. In the stillness that followed, the four of them sat together, strangers no longer bound by fear, kindness, and the slow, painful birth of something deeper. Outside the storm howled on. Inside hearts tore open, wider bleeding light into the dark. The atrium lights dimmed slightly as the airport shifted into its late-night rhythm, the brightest fluorescence conserving power in the quieter zones. Shadows lengthened across the tiled floor, pooling around the booth where the four of them sat in uneasy alliance. Lily had fallen into a light, restless doze against Emily's side, her small chest rising and falling in shallow breaths. Jamal sat rigid on the opposite bench, arms crossed tight over his chest, eyes never leaving Vincent's face. Emily cradled her daughter with one arm, while the other rested protectively on Jamal's knee, a silent promise that she would not let the world take either of them without a fight. Vincent stood a respectful distance away, leaning against the pillar, arms folded to hide the faint tremor in his hands. The $20 bill still lay untouched on the table. Emily had not yet found the strength to pick it up. Every few minutes she glanced at it, then away, as though looking too long might burn her. The scent of hot chocolate drifted from a nearby counter, rich, sweet, impossible, and Vincent felt another wave of remorse crash through him. He could buy the entire food court if he wanted. He could buy buildings, silence enemies, reshape lives with a phone call. Yet here, in this small pocket of warmth he had created, the simplest things remained out of reach for the people who needed them most. Jamal broke the silence, first voice low but edged with accusation. You gonna stand there all night staring? Or you gonna tell us why those guys keep coming back? Vincent met the boy's gaze without flinching. Because I made choices a long time ago that hurt people. Some of them want payback. Jamal's lip curled. So we're just in the way now, no? Vincent said quietly. You're the reason I'm still standing here. Emily looked up sharply. Confusion flickered across her exhausted features, followed by something softer, almost hopeful, almost terrified. What does that mean? Vincent hesitated. The truth felt too heavy, too dangerous to speak aloud. But the children's eyes were on him, Lily's half open, now sleepy but trusting. Jamal's wary but listening. He exhaled slowly. It means I've spent years building walls so nothing could touch me, nothing could hurt. Then tonight, I saw her. He nodded toward Lily. And everything cracked. Emily's breath hitched. Tears welled again, but she did not wipe them away this time. They slid down her cheeks in silent tracks, dripping onto the collar of Lily's borrowed coat. She had spent so long being invisible, another homeless mother, another statistic, another pair of eyes security guards looked through. To be seen, truly seen by someone who could command fear and respect with a single glance, it was dizzying. It hurt. It felt like sunlight on skin that had forgotten warmth. Lily stirred, fully awake. She rubbed her eyes with the sleeve of the coat, then reached across the table toward Vincent. Mister? Your hand's shaking. Vincent looked down. His fingers trembled faintly, betrayal of the storm inside. He clenched them into a fist, then released. I'm okay, he lied. You're not, Lily said simply. She slid out of the booth and walked to him on unsteady legs. Before Emily could stop her, Lily took Vincent's large hand in both of hers. Her palms were cold, calloused from too many nights gripping chain-link fences or cardboard signs. Mama says when someone's shaking, they need holding. Like this. Vincent froze. The touch was feather-light, innocent, devastating. Memories flooded in his father's hand, steadying his own during those early pitching lessons, the way the old man's grip had never wavered, even when the bills piled up and the cough grew worse. Vincent had walked away from that hand years ago. Now a child's smaller one held him steady instead. Remorse tore through him, violent, unrelenting. He had built an empire on fear and control. He had told himself it was necessary to survive, necessary to protect. But protection had become isolation, and survival had become solitude. The guilt roared, louder than ever. How many hands had he refused to hold? How many children had suffered because he chose power over kindness? He sank slowly to one knee, so he was level with Lily. Thank you, he whispered. Lily smiled, a small, tired, beautiful thing. You're welcome. Jamal watched the exchange with narrowed eyes. Suspicion lingered, but a crack had formed. He saw the way Vincent's shoulders sagged, the way his voice roughened with emotion he clearly did not know how to handle. For the first time, the boy wondered if maybe, just maybe, this man was not the monster he had assumed. Emily's voice came soft, trembling. We should get something warm in them, before they fall asleep again. Vincent rose. Stay here. I'll bring it. He walked to the counter, ordered quickly 2 large hot chocolates piled high with marshmallows, chicken noodle soup for Emily, grilled cheese cut into triangles for the children. He paid with cash crisp, hundreds pulled from a slim money clip, and carried the tray back with careful balance. When he set it down, Lily's eyes widened. She reached for the hot chocolate, first cradling the cup like treasure. Jamal hesitated, then took his. Emily stared at the soup as though it might vanish. She lifted the spoon with shaking hands, took one small sip, then another. Tears fell into the broth. Vincent sat across from them now, no longer standing guard but joining. The four of them ate in near silence, the only sounds the soft clink of spoons and the occasional sigh of contentment from Lily. Then the crisis came without warning. A sudden surge of passengers poured into the atrium. Delayed flight announcements had just cleared a backlog. People rushed forward, elbows out, suitcases swinging. In the chaos, someone clipped Vincent's side hard. Pain lanced through him, sharp, white-hot. He staggered, hand flying to his ribs where the old knife wound had never fully healed. Blood bloomed dark against his white shirt, seeping through the fabric in a slow, spreading stain. Emily gasped. "You're hurt." Vincent tried to straighten. "It's nothing." But it was not nothing. The world tilted. His vision narrowed. He braced one hand on the table, breath coming in shallow bursts. Lily cried out. Mr. Jamal was on his feet in an instant. "He's bleeding." Emily moved without thinking. She slid out of the booth, hands hovering, then pressing gently against Vincent's side through the shirt. "Sit down, please." Vincent sank onto the bench. Pain roared through him, but worse was the humiliation the powerful man reduced to vulnerability in front of the very people he had tried to protect. Remorse surged again, mingled now with shame. He had drawn danger to them, and now he was the weak one. Emily tore a napkin from the tray, pressing it to the wound. Her hands shook violently. "We need help." "Security," No, Vincent rasped. "No security. They'll ask questions." "I can't." Emily looked up at him, eyes wide with horror, and something fiercer determination. "Then we do it ourselves." She guided his hand to hold the napkin in place. Then she grabbed Jamal's hoodie zipper, pulling it off in one swift motion. "Help me." Together they fashioned a makeshift bandage hoodie tied tight around Vincent's midsection. Lily watched with huge eyes, tears streaming down her cheeks. "Does it hurt bad?" Vincent forced a small smile through the pain. "Not as bad as it looks, but it hurt terribly. Not just the wound. The deeper pain, the knowledge that his world had finally touched them, tainted them. Guilt clawed at him, violent and merciless. He wanted to send them away, to vanish into the night, so they would never know what kind of man had briefly cared for them. Yet he could not move. Lily's small hand rested on his knee again. Jamal stood close, no longer suspicious, only worried. Emily finished the knot, then sat beside him. Her own body trembled from cold exhaustion, fear, but she did not pull away. "You saved us tonight," she whispered, more than once. Vincent shook his head. "I brought the danger." "You stood in front of it," she said simply. "That's what matters." In the condensed stillness that followed amid the chaos of rushing travelers, the scent of cooling hot chocolate, the soft drip of melting marshmallows, Vincent felt the last of his walls crumble. Love, fierce, protective, paternal, burned through him like fire. Not for power, not for control. For these three fragile souls who had, without knowing it, reached into the dark and pulled him toward light. Outside, the storm raged on. Inside, a bond deepened, forged in pain, sealed in kindness, unbreakable. The pain in Vincent's side had dulled to a steady, throbbing ache beneath the makeshift bandage of Jamal's hoodie. Each breath pulled at the stitches, reminding him how close he had come to bleeding out in front of three people who had already lost too much. Yet he remained seated in the booth, back straight, despite the fire under his ribs, refusing to let them see how deeply the wound still cut. The atrium had quieted again. The surge of passengers had passed like a wave, leaving behind only scattered wrappers and the low murmur of late-night cleaners rolling their carts in the distance. Lily sat pressed against her mother's side, one small hand resting on Vincent's forearm as though anchoring him to the bench. Jamal had moved closer too, still watchful, still guarded, but no longer poised to bolt. The hot chocolate cup stood empty on the table, marshmallow residue clinging to the rims like forgotten snow. Emily held the soup container in both hands, cradling its fading warmth the way a person might hold something fragile and irreplaceable. Vincent watched them in silence. The sight of Lily's thin fingers against his sleeve, the way Emily's shoulders had finally relaxed a fraction, the tentative softening in Jamal's expression, it all pressed against the last remnants of his armor. Inside, the storm had not calmed. It had grown wilder. Remorse clawed at him with fresh ferocity. He had no right to this closeness. He had no right to feel anything like love for these strangers who had stumbled into his orbit. Yet the feeling burned anyway, fierce, paternal, overwhelming. It terrified him more than any rival's knife ever had. A soft crackle echoed overhead. The airport intercom system came to life, the voice flat and mechanical. "Attention, please. We have a report of a missing child. Female, approximately 6 years old, dark curly hair, wearing a blue coat and carrying a small backpack. If you have seen this child or have information, please contact the nearest security personnel or lost and found at information desk number 3. Repeat, missing child female, approximately 6 years old." Emily went rigid. Her soup container slipped from her fingers, clattering to the table. Broth splashed across the surface, soaking into napkins. Lily's eyes widened in sudden recognition. "That's me," she whispered. Emily's face drained of color. She pulled Lily closer, arms wrapping around her as though the announcement itself might reach down and take her daughter away. "They're looking for you," she breathed. Horror flooded her, features raw, immediate. She had left the child alone for only minutes at the restroom earlier that evening. In that brief window, the crowd had separated them, and panic had driven her through the terminal searching. Now the system had caught up. Now strangers would come asking questions. Now they might be separated, Lily to a foster intake, Emily to whatever shelter still had space, or worse, to questions about neglect she could not answer without breaking. Vincent stood slowly, ignoring the fresh stab in his side. "We go to them. Together." Emily looked up at him, eyes glassy with tears and terror. "They'll take her. They always take them when they find us like this." "Not tonight," Vincent said. His voice was low, certain. "Not while I'm here." Jamal slid out of the booth first. "I'm coming too." Vincent nodded once. He offered his hand to Lily. She took it without hesitation, small fingers curling trustingly around his. Emily rose last legs, unsteady, one hand clutching the edge of the table for support. Dizziness washed over her again, black spots dancing at the edges of her vision. She swayed, caught herself, then straightened. Pride and fear warred across her face, but she followed. They moved as a unit through the terminal, Vincent leading Lily at his side, Emily and Jamal close behind. Heads turned as they passed the tall man in the blood-stained shirt, the child swallowed by an expensive coat, the exhausted mother and wary boy trailing like shadows. Whispers followed them, but no one interfered. At the information desk near the central atrium, a female security officer looked up from her clipboard. Her eyes flicked from Vincent to Lily, then widened in recognition. "That's her," the officer said into her radio. "We've got the missing child at desk 3. Seconds later, Emily broke into a run, awkward stumbling propelled by pure maternal desperation. She dropped to her knees in front of Lily, arms opening wide. "Baby, oh God, baby!" Lily flew into her mother's embrace with a sob. Emily crushed her, close rocking back and forth, tears streaming unchecked. I'm so sorry I turned around and you were gone." Vincent stood a few paces back, giving them space. Jamal hovered beside him, fists clenched, eyes darting everywhere, as though expecting the next threat to materialize from the crowd. The security officer approached cautiously. "Ma'am, we need to speak with you both." Standard procedure for missing minors. Emily looked up, still holding Lily. Fear had returned, sharp, paralyzing. "Please. We're just trying to stay together." Vincent stepped forward. "They're together now. That's what matters." The officer hesitated, glancing at Vincent's bloodied shirt, his calm authority, the way Lily clung to him as much as to her mother. Something in his presence made her pause. "Sir, are you family?" Vincent felt the question like a blade. He looked down at Lily, her dark curls pressed against Emily's shoulder, her small hand still reaching back toward him. The word family had not applied to him in decades, yet tonight it felt closer than breath. Before he could answer, Lily twisted in her mother's arms and reached into the deep pocket of Vincent's overcoat, the one still draped around her. Her fingers closed around something round and worn. She pulled it out slowly, the old baseball red stitching frayed, signature faded but still visible. Emily's breath caught. She stared at the ball in Lily's hand. Recognition dawned slowly, painfully, like light breaking through storm clouds. That's yours," Emily whispered, voice cracking. "From before." Vincent went still. "You know it." Emily nodded, tears falling faster. "You gave it to me. The night we said goodbye. You said keep it for luck. For the baby." The words landed like thunder. Vincent's knees nearly buckled. The terminal noise faded to a dull roar in his ears. He stared at. Lily really stared. The shape of her eyes, the curve of her chin, the way her curls caught the light. Pieces he had never allowed himself to assemble clicked into place with brutal clarity. Lily looked up at him, confused but unafraid. Mama Emily's voice trembled. "I didn't know how to tell you. I left because I was scared. Scared of your world. Scared it would take her too. Doctors said. They said she didn't have a heartbeat. I thought she was gone. I ran. But she lived. She's yours, Vincent. She's your daughter." The revelation struck Vincent like a physical blow. Guilt, already a living thing inside him, exploded into something monstrous. He had fathered a child he never knew existed. He had lived years believing himself childless, alone by choice and consequence. He had walked past her suffering every day of her short life, untouched by the knowledge that his blood ran in her veins. Remorse roared through him, violent, consuming, tearing at every fragile wall he had left. He sank to one knee beside them. His hand, scarred steady until now, reached out and brushed a curl from Lily's forehead. Tears burned behind his eyes, hot and unfamiliar. "Lily," he whispered. The name felt sacred on his tongue. Lily studied him with wide, solemn eyes. Then she placed the baseball back in his palm, closing his fingers around it gently. "It's okay to cry," she said softly. "Even big people can cry." Vincent closed his eyes. A single tear escaped, tracing a slow path down his cheek. He had not cried in decades, not since his father's funeral, not since the night he chose the life that led him here. Emily reached out hesitant and touched his shoulder. "I never stopped thinking about you," she whispered, "even when I hated what you became. I wanted her safe." Vincent opened his eyes. He looked at Emily, saw the woman who had once laughed with him in stolen moments, who had carried his child through terror and cold and hunger alone. Love surged through him, fierce, protective, paternal, mingled now with grief for every lost year. "I'll keep her safe," he said, voice rough with emotion. "Both of you." From now on, Jamal watched in silence, suspicion giving way to quiet awe. Outside, the snow fell harder, blanketing the city in white silence. Inside, a family fractured, improbable reel began to form in the ruins of old pain. The security officer eventually waved them through after a brief, hushed conversation. Vincent's quiet authority. The sight of Lily clinging to both her mother and this tall, bloodied stranger and Emily's tear-streaked but composed explanation seemed to satisfy the minimum requirements. No formal report, no separation. Just a gentle reminder to stay together and a suggestion to visit the medical desk if anyone needed attention. Vincent thanked the woman with a nod that carried more weight than words. She looked away quickly, as though suddenly aware she had glimpsed something she was not meant to see. They moved away from the bright lights of the information desk back toward the quieter upper levels where the United Club Lounge waited behind frosted glass doors. Vincent led without asking permission. Emily followed, one arm around Lily, the other holding Jamal's hand so tightly the boy winced but did not pull away. The child, his daughter, kept glancing up at Vincent with wide, wondering eyes, the old baseball now tucked safely back into the pocket of the oversized coat she still wore like a cape. At the lounge entrance, the attendant recognized Vincent immediately. No questions about membership or companions. A quiet swipe of a card, a murmured, "Good evening, mister." Rossi, and the heavy door swung open to reveal soft golden lighting, deep leather chairs, and the low hum of a fireplace that burned gas logs behind tempered glass. The scent of fresh coffee and warm pastries drifted out like an invitation. Emily stopped just inside the threshold. Her sneakers' worn soles, peeling laces, frayed, looked obscene against the polished marble floor. She glanced down at herself, the same hoodie worn for weeks, jeans stiff with grime hair tangled and dull. Then she looked at Vincent, his tailored shirt now stained dark with blood, yet still carrying the faint sheen of quality fabric, the expensive watch glinting at his cuff, the effortless way the staff deferred to him. The contrast struck her like a physical blow. Humiliation rose fresh and bitter in her throat. She had once dreamed of places like this, warm, quiet, safe. Now entering one felt like trespassing. Vincent noticed her hesitation. He turned back, voice gentle. "It's okay. Come in." Emily swallowed. "We don't belong here." "You do tonight," he said simply. Lily tugged her mother's hand. "Mama, it's warm, and it smells like cookies." That small plea broke the last of Emily's resistance. She stepped inside. Vincent guided them to a secluded corner booth near the windows where the storm outside painted swirling white patterns against the dark glass. He helped Lily climb onto the deep cushioned seat, folding his ruined jacket into a pillow behind her back. She curled up immediately, eyelids heavy. Jamal sat beside her, still watchful but quieter now. Emily eased down last body, trembling from exhaustion and the sudden absence of cold. Vincent signaled the server with a subtle lift of his hand. Moments later, a tray arrived, fresh hot chocolate topped with whipped cream and extra marshmallows for the children, herbal tea for Emily, black coffee for him. A small plate of warm chocolate chip cookies, still soft from the oven. He placed everything within easy reach, then sat across from them, no demands, no expectations. Lily reached for a cookie first. She broke it in half, carefully offering one piece to Jamal, then one to her mother. Emily took it with shaking fingers. The first bite crumbled against her tongue, rich, buttery, impossibly good. Tears slipped down her cheeks again. She tried to hide them, but Vincent saw. "You haven't eaten properly in how long?" he asked quietly. Emily looked away. "Days. Maybe longer. Shelter's run out. We share what's left." Vincent's jaw tightened. Remorse surged, hot, violent, suffocating. He pictured her nights huddled under thin blankets on concrete, wind slicing through every layer, hunger gnawing until sleep became impossible. While he had sat in penthouses with full refrigerators, untouched takeout boxes discarded after one bite. The unfairness of it clawed at him. He wanted to tear the city apart for allowing this. He wanted to gather her up and shield her from every cold gust she had ever endured. He reached across the table slowly, carefully, and covered her hand with his own. The touch was light, but it anchored her. Emily froze, then turned her palm up, fingers curling instinctively around his. Trust fragile burning flowed between them like current. Jamal watched the exchange. His suspicion had not vanished, but it had softened into something closer to confusion. "You really didn't know about her?" he asked Vincent. Vincent shook his head. "No. If I had—" His voice cracked. He cleared his throat. "I would have torn the world apart to find you both." Lily stirred, reaching for the baseball in her pocket. She placed it on the table between them. "This is yours," she said to Vincent. "But maybe it can be ours now, like a family ball." Vincent stared at the worn leather. Tears burned behind his eyes again. He picked it up, thumb tracing the faded signature his father's hand. Then he placed it back in Lily's small palm. "It already is," he whispered. Emily watched him, heart tearing open wider with every breath. She had spent years hating the man who had once held her heart, hating what his choices had become, hating the danger she fled to protect their unborn child. Now here he sat, wounded, vulnerable, offering everything he had without asking for anything in return. Love, quiet, fierce, maternal, welled up in her chest, mingling with grief for lost years and gratitude so profound it hurt. The moment of stillness stretched, condensed, sacred until it shattered. Vincent's phone vibrated against the table. He glanced at the screen. His driver, 3 outside the lounge entrance. Same crew, armed, waiting for you to step out. Vincent's expression hardened. He looked at Emily. "Stay here. Lock the door behind me." Emily's grip tightened on his hand. "No. You're hurt. You can't. I have to." He stood wincing as the movement pulled at his side. "They won't come in here. Too public. Too many cameras." Jamal stood too. "I'm coming." Vincent looked down at the boy, saw the fear, the determination. "You stay with them. Protect them if I don't come back right away." Jamal hesitated, then nodded once. Vincent walked to the door. Before he stepped out, he turned back. Lily was watching him with wide eyes. Emily stood, one hand pressed to her mouth. He met her gaze. "I'll come back," he said. "I promise." Then he was gone. Outside the lounge in the dimly lit corridor, 3 men waited, Marco among them. They straightened as Vincent approached. "Boss wants you to step aside," Marco said. "Let us handle the loose ends, including the girl." Vincent stopped 3 feet away. "You touch her, you die tonight." Marco laughed softly. "You're bleeding, Vin. You're tired. Walk away." Vincent stepped closer. "I've walked away from too many things already." One of the men moved quick, reaching for something under his jacket. Vincent moved faster. A single, controlled motion, he caught the man's wrist twisted just enough to force the hand open. A small knife clattered to the floor. Marco's smile faded. "You're making this personal." "It's always been personal," Vincent said quietly. "You just didn't know it." He released the man's wrist. The 3 backed off, slowly, grudgingly, then turned and disappeared down the service stairwell. Vincent leaned against the wall for a moment, breathing hard. Pain throbbed through his side, but it was nothing compared to the ache in his chest. He had almost lost them again before he even had them. When he returned to the lounge, Emily rushed forward. She touched his face, his arm searching for new wounds. "Are you okay?" He nodded. "They're gone." Lily ran to him, throwing her arms around his legs. Jamal followed more slowly, but he came. Vincent knelt, gathering Lily close. Emily sank to her knees beside them. Jamal stood over them like a small sentinel. In that quiet, golden space, fireplace flickering storm raging outside, Vincent felt the deepest tear yet. Not pain, not guilt. Love, raw, complete, paternal, flooding every broken place inside him. He looked at Emily over Lily's head. "I'm not letting you go again," he whispered. "Any of you." Emily nodded, tears falling freely now. "Then don't." The 4 of them stayed like that, huddled together on the soft carpet while the world outside spun on indifferent. Inside, healing began. The lounge fireplace cast flickering orange light across the low table, turning the remnants of cookies and empty cups into soft shadows. Lily had drifted back into sleep, curled on the deep seat with Vincent's coat pulled up to her chin like a blanket fortress. Jamal sat cross-legged on the floor beside her, one hand resting protectively on her small ankle eyes, half-lidded but alert. Emily leaned against the armrest, knees drawn up, staring at the storm beyond the window, as though the swirling snow held answers she could not find inside herself. Vincent remained on the opposite bench, elbows on his knees, hands clasped so tightly the knuckles stood pale against his skin. The makeshift bandage around his midsection had soaked through again. A faint metallic scent mingled with the coffee and wood smoke. He ignored it. Pain was an old companion. What he could not ignore was the quiet certainty settling in his chest this night had changed everything, and the change terrified him as much as it healed him. He had spent years convincing himself that power insulated him from regret. Every decision, every deal struck in shadowed rooms, every rival silenced without a sound had been necessary, he told himself. Necessary to rise above the hunger of his childhood, the cold apartments, the father who worked himself into an early grave. Now that lie lay shattered at his feet. Lily, his daughter, had lived 6 years in the very poverty he had clawed his way out of while he sat in heated penthouses counting money that could have bought her warmth 1,000 times over. The remorse was no longer gnawing. It was devouring him whole, tearing through muscle and bone until only raw bleeding truth remained. Emily's voice broke the stillness, soft and hesitant. "You're still bleeding." Vincent glanced down. The dark stain had spread wider. He shrugged, small, careful movement. "It'll hold." She rose slowly, legs unsteady from fatigue. "Let me see it again." He started to protest, but the look in her eyes, fierce concern wrapped in exhaustion, silenced him. She knelt beside him, fingers gentle as she lifted the edge of his shirt. The wound looked angry, red, swollen, fresh blood welling where stitches had pulled. Emily's breath caught. She pressed a clean napkin to it, holding firm. "You need real help," she whispered. "I've had worse," he said. Then quieter, "I've deserved worse." Emily's hand stilled. She looked up at him, tears shimmering. "Don't say that." Vincent met her gaze. "I've spent my life making sure other people paid for my choices. Tonight I almost made you pay. You and her. And him." He nodded toward Jamal. "That's not something I can wash off with money or power." Emily's voice trembled. "You stood between us and them. Twice. That's more than anyone's ever done." Before Vincent could answer, his phone vibrated again, sharp, insistent. He pulled it out. The screen showed a blocked number, but he knew the pattern. He answered without speaking. A voice, low familiar, edged with menace, came through. "You think hiding in the lounge makes you safe, Rossi. We know where you are. We know who you're with. Step outside alone or we come in. And we don't ask nicely." Vincent's jaw clenched. "You touch them, Marco, and there won't be enough left of you to bury." Marco laughed, cold, hollow. Big words for a man bleeding out in a fancy chair. 10 minutes. Clock's running. The line went dead. Vincent set the phone down carefully. Emily had heard every word. Her face had gone ashen. Dizziness swept over her again, the room tilting. She gripped the edge of the table to steady herself. "They're coming for you," she whispered. "Because of us." Vincent stood slow, deliberate, ignoring the fresh stab of pain. "They're coming because of me. Always have been." Jamal rose, 2 small fists clenched. "You're not going out there alone." Vincent looked down at the boy, saw the fear beneath the bravado, the way he positioned himself slightly in front of Lily even now. Something cracked inside Vincent, clean, painful, final. "I have to end this," he said quietly. "Not with blood, not tonight. But I have to end it." Emily reached for his sleeve. "Please, don't." He covered her hand with his own. "I won't leave you unprotected. I swear it." He walked to the lounge door, paused, then turned back. Lily had woken. She sat up, rubbing her eyes, confusion clouding her small face. "Mister," she called softly. Vincent crossed back to her in 3 strides. He knelt, cupping her cheek with one careful hand. "I need you to stay right here with your mama and Jamal." "Okay, I'm gonna make sure no one bothers us anymore." Lily's lip trembled. "You'll come back," Vincent's throat closed. "Always." He pressed a gentle kiss to her forehead, instinctive, reverent, then stood. Emily rose with him, tears streaming unchecked. Outside the lounge in the service corridor, Marco waited with 4 men now. They blocked both ends, postures tense but weapons still concealed. The airport cameras blinked overhead, silent witnesses. Vincent stopped in the middle of the corridor. "You wanted to talk." "Talk." Marco stepped forward. "You've gone soft, Vin. Playing house with a homeless girl and her kid, that's not the man who built this city's shadows." Vincent's voice stayed level. "That girl is my daughter. And if you or anyone else ever looks at her again, I will burn everything you have to the ground. Not with guns. With every connection, every favor, every dollar I own. You'll wish I'd used a bullet." Marco studied him long, calculating. Then he smirked. "You're threatening to go legitimate on us. I'm threatening to protect what's mine," Vincent said. "Walk away. Last chance." One of the men shifted hands, slipping toward his coat. Vincent moved faster than pain should have allowed. He closed the distance, caught the man's wrist, twisted until the concealed pistol dropped with a metallic clatter. He kicked it away without breaking eye contact with Marco. The other 3 tensed. Vincent released the man's wrist. "I don't want to hurt anyone tonight, but I will if you force me." Marco's smirk faded. He glanced at his men, then back at Vincent. For the first time, uncertainty flickered in his eyes. He raised both hands slowly. "This isn't over," he said. Vincent nodded once. It is for tonight. Marco jerked his head. The four retreated silent, grudging disappearing down the stairwell. Vincent leaned against the wall, breathing hard. Blood had soaked through the napkin again. Dizziness tugged at the edges of his vision. But he straightened, pushed off the wall, walked back to the lounge door. When he entered, Emily rushed to him. She touched his face, his chest, searching for new wounds. Lily ran into his legs, hugging tight. Jamal stood close, eyes wide. Vincent sank onto the nearest chair. Emily knelt in front of him, retying the bandage with shaking hands. Tears fell onto his shirt. "You didn't have to do that alone," she whispered. "I did," he said, "because I won't let my past touch you again." Lily climbed onto his lap, careful, gentle, and wrapped her arms around his neck. "You're our hero," she murmured into his shoulder. Vincent closed his eyes. Tears slipped free, silent, unstoppable. The remorse still burned, but beneath it grew something stronger: resolve. Protection. Love so fierce it eclipsed every shadow he had ever carried. Emily rested her forehead against his. "We're safe now," she breathed. Vincent held them both, his daughter and the woman who had carried her through hell alone. Jamal stepped closer, small hand resting on Vincent's shoulder. In the quiet, golden light of the lounge, with snow still falling outside, the family that had never been given a chance began to heal. The lounge had grown even quieter as the night deepened the storm outside, now a steady, muffled roar against the thick glass. Only a handful of other travelers remained scattered through the space, businessmen tapping laptops, a lone woman reading under a lamp, none paying attention to the small family huddled in the corner booth. Lily slept deeply now, her head pillowed on Emily's lap, small fingers still loosely curled around the baseball Vincent had let her keep for the night. Jamal had moved to the floor again, back against the seat base, knees drawn up, watching the door like a sentinel too young for the weight he carried. Vincent sat motionless, one hand resting lightly on Lily's ankle where it draped over the edge of the cushion. The fresh bandage Emily had tied, using strips torn from a lounge blanket the server had discreetly provided, held the bleeding at bay, but every heartbeat sent dull pulses through his side. He welcomed the pain. It kept him sharp, kept him present. Inside, though, the true wound festered deeper. Remorse had become a living thing, coiling tighter with every breath. Lily took every exhausted line etched into Emily's face, every wary glance. Jamal cast his way. He had fathered a child who had known only hunger and cold, while he accumulated wealth measured in millions. The injustice of it screamed in his blood, violent, unrelenting. He wanted to roar at the unfairness, to shatter every mirror that showed him the man he had become. His phone vibrated once short, sharp. He glanced at the screen. His driver again. They didn't leave. "They're circling the terminal. 3 cars now. Waiting for you to move." One just asked a custodian about the lounge exits. Vincent's jaw locked. He looked at Emily. She had been watching him, reading the shift in his expression before he could mask it. "They're still out there," she whispered, voice cracking on the last word. He nodded once. "They won't stop until I make them." Emily's hand flew to her mouth. Horror bloomed fresh across her features, eyes wide, breath shallow. "You can't go back out. You're hurt. I won't let them near you," Vincent said, low and fierce. "Not ever again." Jamal stood slowly. "I heard what you said to them. You're gonna fight, aren't you?" Vincent met the boy's gaze. "Not fight. Finish." Emily rose, too careful not to wake Lily. Her legs trembled. She steadied herself against the table. "Then take us with you. We're not staying here alone." Vincent started to argue, then stopped. The fear in her eyes, the same fear she had carried for 6 years alone, was worse than any blade. He nodded. "We go together, but you stay behind me. Always." They gathered their few things, Lily's backpack, the baseball, the half-eaten plate of cookies wrapped in a napkin for later. Vincent helped Emily lift Lily into her arms. The child stirred, but did not wake, nestling her face against her mother's neck. Jamal walked close to Vincent's side, small shoulders squared. They slipped out a side door the server had quietly pointed out, service access leading to a lower-level corridor usually reserved for staff. The hallway smelled of cleaning solution and damp concrete. Emergency lights cast long, sickly yellow pools along the walls. Vincent moved ahead, one hand on the small of Emily's back, guiding without touching too possessively. Every few steps he paused, listening. Halfway down, footsteps echoed behind them, heavy, deliberate. Vincent stopped. "Stay here." He turned. Marco emerged from the shadows at the far end, flanked by 2 men Vincent recognized from earlier confrontations. No guns visible, airport security too close, but the threat was unmistakable. Marco spread his hands. "You're making this hard, Vin. Just hand over the kid. Boss says she's leverage. Nothing personal." Vincent stepped forward, placing himself fully between his family and the 3 men. "Everything about this is personal." Marco's smile was thin, cruel. "You really think you can protect them? You're bleeding out. You're tired." You're done. Vincent's voice dropped. I've been done for years. Tonight I start over. One of the men lunged quick, aiming to grab Vincent's injured side. Vincent sidestepped, caught the man's arm, twisted it behind his back just enough to force a grunt of pain, then shoved him away. The man stumbled into the wall. Marco's expression darkened. You're choosing the hard way. Vincent advanced another step. I already chose. Years ago. I chose wrong. I'm choosing right now. The second man moved faster, more aggressive. Vincent met him halfway, a controlled block, a sharp push that sent the man staggering back. No punches thrown, no blood drawn beyond what already stained Vincent's shirt. But the message landed. Marco raised a hand, stopping his men. This isn't worth it, he muttered. Not tonight. They retreated, slow, resentful, disappearing around the corner. Vincent exhaled, leaning against the wall for support. Dizziness swept over him. Black spots danced at the edges of his vision. Emily hurried forward, Lily still in her arms, and pressed her free hand to his chest. You're shaking, she whispered. Vincent covered her hand with his own. I'm fine. You're not. Lily stirred, blinking awake. Mr. Vincent forced a small smile. Just talking to some people, sweetheart. They're gone now. But they were not entirely gone. As they continued down the corridor toward the parking garage exit, Vincent's phone buzzed again, this time a text from an unknown number, warehouse lot behind Terminal 5. 10 minutes. Bring the girl or we take the boy instead. Your call. Vincent froze. Jamal read the message over his shoulder. The boy's face paled. They're gonna take me, Jamal whispered. Emily made a small broken sound. Horror flooded her, features raw, paralyzing. She clutched Lily tighter, then reached for Jamal, pulling him close with her free arm. No, no. Vincent stared at the screen. Rage surged, cold-focused, but beneath it terror. Not for himself. For them. For the children who had already lost so much. He looked at Emily. I have to go. Emily shook her head violently. You can't. They'll kill you. If I don't, they'll come for him. He nodded toward Jamal. I won't let that happen. Tears streamed down Emily's face. Then we all go. Together. Vincent started to refuse, then saw the steel in her eyes, the same steel that had kept her alive through 6 years of cold nights, hunger, humiliation. He nodded once. They moved quickly now down the service stairs through a loading dock door that Vincent forced open with a shoulder. Cold air rushed in, carrying sleet that stung like needles. The warehouse lot behind Terminal 5 loomed ahead, chain-link fence, abandoned cargo pallets, sodium lights buzzing overhead. Vincent led them to the edge of the lot, then stopped. Stay here, behind the pallets. Don't move until I call you. Emily clutched his sleeve. Promise you'll come back. Vincent cupped her cheek, gentle, reverent. I promise. He walked into the open. Marco waited under a flickering light, 2 more men beside him. A third figure held Jamal's hoodie stolen earlier in the confusion, dangling it like bait. Vincent stopped 10 feet away. Let's finish this, Marco smirked. You brought the kid. Vincent's voice was steel. She's safe. You'll never touch her. Marco laughed. Then you die alone. One man stepped forward, knife glinting. Vincent braced. Then Lily's voice, small, terrified, cut through the night. Mr. She had broken free from Emily, running toward him, coat flapping. Emily and Jamal followed, desperate. Vincent's heart stopped. Marco's eyes lit with ugly triumph. Perfect. Vincent moved faster than pain should allow. He placed himself between Lily and the men, arms out. Stay back, the man with the knife lunged. Vincent caught his wrist twisted, forced him to drop. But another grabbed for Lily. Vincent roared, raw, primal, and tackled the second man to the ground. They rolled across wet asphalt. Vincent took a punch to his wounded side. Pain exploded white-hot. He pinned the man anyway, forearm across his throat. Marco drew a gun, small, concealed. Vincent froze. Then Emily stepped forward, shaking, terrified but unyielding. She placed herself between Marco and Vincent. You want him, she said, voice trembling but clear. You go through me. Marco hesitated. Something in her eyes, pure maternal fury, made him falter. Vincent rose slowly. Blood dripped onto the pavement. He walked to Emily, pulled her behind him, then faced Marco. Last chance, Vincent said. Walk away, or lose everything. Marco stared at the 4 of them, Vincent bleeding but standing, Emily defiant, Lily clinging to her mother's leg, Jamal beside them like a small guardian. Marco lowered the gun. This isn't over, he muttered. Vincent nodded. It is for you. Marco and his men backed away, slow, defeated, then vanished into the shadows. Vincent sank to his knees. Emily dropped beside him, hands pressing his wound again. Lily threw her arms around his neck. Jamal stood over them, fierce and protective. Vincent looked at them, his family. I'm done, he whispered. No more running. No more shadows. Emily kissed his forehead. Then come home with us. In the falling snow, under the harsh warehouse lights, Vincent held them close. The tearing inside him reached its deepest point, not destruction, but rebirth. The warehouse lot behind Terminal 5 stretched dark and desolate under the stuttering sodium lights, puddles of melting sleet, reflecting fractured orange glows across cracked asphalt. Wind sliced between the chain-link fence and the hulking cargo containers carrying the distant whine of jet engines and the closer, sharper bite of winter. Vincent knelt on one knee in the open blood, pooling slowly beneath him, his breath coming in visible clouds. Emily crouched a few paces behind with Lily pressed to her chest and Jamal shielded against her side, the three of them, half hidden by a rusted pallet stack. They had followed despite his plea. Love and terror had overridden caution. Marco stood under the single working floodlight 20 feet away, flanked by 4 men, now 2 from the earlier corridor, 2 new faces. Vincent recognized as low-level enforcers from the North Side crew. One held a length of chain loosely coiled in his fist. Another cradled a tire iron against his shoulder. No guns visible. Marco knew better than to risk an airport perimeter shootout, but the intent was unmistakable. Vincent rose slowly. Pain roared through his side, white-hot and nauseating, but he forced his spine straight. "You wanted me out here," he said, voice carrying clear across the wind. "Here I am." Marco tilted his head. "You look half dead already. Makes this easy." Vincent took 1 step forward. "Then make your move," Marco signaled. The man with the chain swung low, aiming to sweep Vincent's legs. Vincent jumped back, boots skidding on wet pavement. The chain clanged against concrete. Another man rushed in from the side, tire iron raised. Vincent caught the wrist mid-swing, twisted hard enough to force a grunt, then shoved the man backward into his partner. They stumbled together but did not fall. Behind Vincent, Lily whimpered. The sound pierced him deeper than any blow. Emily clutched her daughter tighter. "Vincent, stay back," he barked, never taking his eyes off Marco. Marco laughed short, ugly. "Look at you. Bleeding for strays. You used to be somebody." Vincent advanced another step. "I still am." The chain man recovered and lunged again, this time higher. Vincent ducked, felt the lynx whistle past his ear, then drove his shoulder into the man's midsection. They crashed to the ground together. Vincent pinned him forearm across the throat, just enough pressure to hold, not kill. The man gasped, struggled, then went limp. Marco's smile vanished. Enough games. He stepped forward himself, pulling a switchblade from his coat, quick flick, steel gleaming. Vincent rose, breathing hard. Blood dripped steadily now, darkening the asphalt in small dark coins. Then Lily broke free. She slipped from Emily's arms, small, determined, terrified, and ran straight toward Vincent. "Mister, don't let them hurt you," Emily screamed, raw, desperate, and lunged after her. Jamal followed, small legs pumping. Vincent's world narrowed to one point, his daughter running into danger. He roared primal broken and charged Marco. Marco swung the blade. Vincent caught the wrist twisted, forced the knife to drop. They grappled close, brutal, no room for finesse. Vincent took a knee to the wounded side. Pain exploded so violently his vision blacked for a heartbeat. He staggered but held on, slamming Marco against a cargo container. Metal rang. The other men rushed in. Emily reached them first. She threw herself between Vincent and the nearest enforcer, arms out. "Stop." The man hesitated only a second, but it was enough. Vincent shoved Marco away, spun, and caught the enforcer's arm before the fist could land. He twisted, forced the man to his knees. Jamal arrived, small fists flying uselessly at another man's leg. The enforcer laughed, then stopped laughing when Vincent's elbow cracked against his jaw. Not hard enough to break bone. Hard enough to drop him. Lily reached Vincent. She threw her arms around his waist face, pressed to his bloodied shirt. "Don't die," she sobbed. "Please don't die." Vincent wrapped one arm around her, protective, trembling, while keeping the other raised against the remaining threats. Marco pushed off the container, wiping blood from his lip. "You're finished, Vin. Look at you. Bleeding out for a kid who don't even know you." Vincent looked down at Lily, his daughter, clinging to him with everything she had. Then he looked at Emily, standing defiant in front of him, thin frame shaking but unbowed. Then at Jamal, small, fierce, refusing to run. Something inside Vincent shattered completely. He straightened, slow, deliberate, despite the blood loss, despite the pain that threatened to pull him under. "I know her," he said quietly. "Better than you'll ever know anything," Marco sneered. "Prove it." Vincent reached into his pocket, slow, careful, and pulled out the baseball. He held it up so the light caught the faded signature. "This was my father's," he said. "He gave it to me the day he taught me to throw. Said it was for luck. For family." He looked at Lily. "I didn't know she existed. But she's mine. And I'll die before I let you near her." Marco stared long, calculating. Then he laughed again, hollow defeated. "You're pathetic," he muttered. "Bleeding in a parking lot for ghosts." Vincent stepped forward one last time. "Walk away," he said, "or I stop holding back." Marco looked at his men, two on the ground, two wavering. He looked at Vincent bleeding, exhausted but radiating something unbreakable. Marco raised both hands. "We're done," he said, "for tonight." They retreated, slow, grudging, melting into the shadows beyond the fence. Vincent sank to his knees. Lily clung tighter. Emily dropped beside him, hands pressing his wound again. Jamal stood over them, small chest heaving. Vincent looked at Emily. Tears streamed down her face, relief, terror, love, all at once. "I thought," she choked, "I thought they'd take you." Vincent cupped her cheek with a bloodied hand. "Never." Then soft, almost inaudible, he spoke to Lily. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I'm so sorry I wasn't there." Lily lifted her head. "You're here now." Vincent closed his eyes. Tears slipped free, silent, endless. Emily leaned in forehead against his. "We're all here now." But the revelation was not finished. As Vincent's strength ebbed, Emily's voice cracked again, lower, trembling. "There's more," she whispered. "I didn't tell you everything." Vincent opened his eyes. Emily swallowed. "When I left, the doctor said the baby had no heartbeat. They told me she was gone. I believed them. I ran because I couldn't face you knowing our child was dead. But she started moving again. Weeks later, a miracle they called it. She survived. Inside me. When no one thought she would." Vincent stared at her, stunned, numb. Emily's tears fell onto his shirt. "I thought she was lost forever. Just like I thought you were. But she's here. She's alive. Because of some impossible grace." Vincent looked down at Lily, his daughter, the child he had never known, the child who had survived against every odds stacked against her. The remorse that had torn him all night reached its deepest, most shattering point. He had lost 6 years. He had let her suffer. And yet she had found him. Vincent pulled them both close, Lily and Emily, his arms trembling with exhaustion and emotion. "I'll spend every day making it right," he whispered. "Every single day." Jamal stepped closer, small hand on Vincent's shoulder. Vincent looked up at the boy, saw the fear, the loyalty, the quiet hope. "And you too," Vincent said. "You're family now. All of you." In the falling sleet under the harsh warehouse lights, Vincent held his family bloodied, broken, but finally whole. The storm outside raged on. Inside him, the deepest tear began slowly, painfully, to mend. Snow continued to fall in thick, silent sheets across the warehouse lot, blanketing the blood-streaked asphalt in soft white forgiveness. Vincent remained on his knees, one arm wrapped around Lily, the other supporting Emily as she pressed the last clean napkin she could find against the wound that refused to stop weeping. Jamal stood close, small hands clenched at his sides, eyes darting between the retreating shadows and the man who had just placed his body between danger and them all. The wind howled, yet in the small circle they formed, the cold felt distant, almost irrelevant. Vincent's breath came shallow and ragged. Each inhale pulled fire through his ribs, each exhale carried the taste of iron and regret. He looked down at Lily, his daughter, her dark curls dusted with snowflakes, her thin arms locked around his neck as though letting go would mean losing him forever. The sight tore through him with fresh violence. 6 years. 6 winters of cold she had endured, while he slept between silk sheets in heated rooms that cost more per night than most people earned in months. 6 birthdays unmarked. 6 Christmases without warmth. 6 springs where hunger greeted her before sunrise. The numbers burned in his mind like accusations he could never answer. Remorse reached its deepest, most merciless depth. It was no longer a gnawing thing. It was a storm inside his chest, ripping open every scar he had ever tried to seal. He had built towers of money and fear to escape the poverty that once starved him, only to leave his own flesh and blood to starve in the same streets. The unfairness of it screamed louder than the wind. He wanted to howl at the sky, to beg forgiveness from a child too young to understand how deeply he had failed her. Lily lifted her head, small nose red, from cold eyes shining with tears and trust. "You're cold," she whispered, pressing her cheek to his. "But you're warm too, inside." Vincent closed his eyes. A sob broke free, quiet, broken, the sound of a man who had spent decades refusing to feel anything at all. He pulled her closer, careful of his wound, careful of her fragility. "I'm so sorry," he rasped. "I should have found you sooner. I should have known." Emily knelt fully now, heedless of the wet pavement soaking through her jeans. She cupped Vincent's face with both hands, thin, chapped, trembling, and forced him to meet her gaze. "You know now," she said, voice cracking but steady. "That's enough. Knowing now is enough." Jamal stepped forward, hesitant. "She's right. You fought for us. Nobody ever did that before." Vincent looked at the boy, saw the hunger in his frame, the wariness in his eyes that no child should carry, and felt another layer of guilt peel away. He reached out, placed a heavy, blood-stained hand on Jamal's shoulder. "You too," he said. "You're mine to protect now. Both of you." The boy's lip trembled. He nodded once, small, fierce, and leaned into the touch. They stayed like that, 4 figures huddled against the storm, until distant sirens wailed faintly from the terminal access road. Airport security, perhaps, or paramedics finally alerted by a custodian who had glimpsed blood on the pavement. Vincent straightened as much as pain allowed. "We need to move," he said quietly. "My car is in short term. We'll go to my place. It's safe. Warm. There's food beds, doctors on call." Emily hesitated. Pride flickered, old, stubborn pride that had kept her saying no to handouts for so long. Then she looked at Lily, shivering, exhausted, clinging to a father she had only just met, and the pride dissolved. "Okay," she breathed. Vincent stood slow, unsteady, then lifted Lily into his arms, despite the protest of torn muscle and fresh blood. She nestled against his chest without fear. Emily took Jamal's hand. Together they walked, limping, bleeding, but together across the lot toward the parking structure. In the back of the black SUV, heated seats already warm, soft blankets folded neatly on the rear bench. Vincent settled Lily across his lap, while Emily buckled Jamal beside her. The driver said nothing, only glanced once in the mirror with quiet respect before pulling away. As the airport lights faded behind them, Vincent looked down at his daughter. "I have a house on the lake," he said softly. "Big windows, a fireplace, a room just for you with books, toys, anything you want, and another for Jamal. And one for your mama. No more shelters, no more cold nights." Lily's eyes widened. With hot chocolate every day, Vincent smiled through tears. Every single day. Emily reached across the seat, threaded her fingers through his. "You don't have to give us everything," she whispered. "I want to," he answered. "I need to." The car glided through the snow-choked streets of Chicago, past glittering high-rises and darkened tenements, past the worlds of wealth and want that had once defined them both. Vincent felt the last wall inside him crumble, not with violence, but with quiet, aching surrender. He had spent years believing love made a man weak. Tonight he understood the opposite: love made him whole. By the time they reached the gated estate on the lake, lights glowing warm against the storm, Lily had fallen asleep again, cheek against his chest. Jamal's head rested on Emily's shoulder. Vincent carried his daughter inside, past marble floors, past art worth more than most people's homes. Upstairs to a guest suite already prepared with fresh linens, a crib-sized bed brought in hastily, and a small mountain of stuffed animals the housekeeper had gathered on short notice. He laid Lily down, gently tucked the blankets around her thin frame, then sat on the edge of the mattress, watching her breathe. Emily stood in the doorway, Jamal asleep against her hip. Vincent looked up. "I'll step away from it all," he said quietly. "The business. The shadows. I'll sell what I can. Redirect the rest. Schools, shelters, food programs. Real help. Not guilt money. Real change." Emily crossed the room, knelt beside him. "You don't have to erase who you were," she said. "Just choose who you want to be now." Vincent took her hand, cold fingers against his warm palm. "I choose this," he whispered. "I choose you. I choose her. I choose him." Tears slipped down Emily's cheeks. She leaned in, rested her forehead against his. "Then we choose you too." Outside, the storm began to ease. Inside, a family improbable, scarred beautiful, took its first shared breath, and in that quiet, condensed stillness, Vincent understood the deepest lesson of all. Love arrives not in power, but in surrender. Not in wealth, but in open hands. Not in perfection, but in broken places made whole by grace. Knowledge matters. Knowledge opens eyes. Knowledge heals old wounds. Knowledge builds bridges. Knowledge lights the way forward. Lesson after lesson emerges from pain. Lesson upon lesson teaches compassion. Lesson by lesson we grow kinder. Lesson through lesson we learn forgiveness. Lesson within lesson we rediscover hope. Education of the heart never ends. Education of the heart changes everything. Education of the heart redeems what was lost. Education of the heart binds what was broken. Education of the heart creates tomorrow. To everyone watching this video tonight, may you enjoy good health, a joyful life, and daily peace. If this story touched you, if it stirred something deep inside, please subscribe to the channel, like this video, and share it with someone who needs to hear it. New engaging stories arrive every day. How did this story make you feel? Does it remind you of anything in your own life? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I read every one, and I want to hear the emotions living in your hearts. Thank you for being here with me tonight. Goodbye for now, and I promise I'll see you again in the next video. Disclaimer: All stories on this channel are fictional and created solely for entertainment purposes. Any resemblance to real people, events, or places is purely coincidental.